Scopolamine, devil's breath. In Colombia, criminals extract scopolamine from borrachero trees. They process it into a fine, white powder. Then, they blow it in your face. What happens next is the most terrifying drug effect documented in modern medicine. Within minutes, you lose your free will. Not your consciousness, your will. You're awake, functional, and completely obedient. Victims have been documented emptying their bank accounts, handing over possessions, and helping robbers carry furniture out of their own homes, all while appearing perfectly normal to bystanders. The drug blocks acetylcholine receptors in the brain, disrupting memory formation and decision-making simultaneously. Victims wake up hours later with zero recollection of what happened. No fragments, no fuzzy memories. Complete blackout while being fully operational. Hospitals use scopolamine in tiny doses for motion sickness patches. At criminal doses, it essentially turns you into a remote-controlled human. Colombian authorities report thousands of cases annually. The drug doesn't knock you out. It's worse. It makes you cooperate. Krokodil, desomorphine. When heroin became too expensive in rural Russia during the early 2000s, users found an alternative. They cooked desomorphine from codeine tablets, gasoline, paint thinner, hydrochloric acid, and red phosphorus from matchbox strike strips. The resulting drug got its street name from what it does to skin. Krokodil means crocodile. Users' skin turns scaly, discolored, and begins rotting from injection sites outward. The caustic cooking chemicals aren't filtered out. They're injected directly into veins. Blood vessels die. Tissue necrotizes. Bones become exposed. Gangrene sets in within weeks of regular use. The high lasts about 90 minutes, roughly a third as long as heroin, so users inject more frequently, accelerating the damage. Average life expectancy after beginning regular use was estimated at 1 to 2 years. At its peak around 2011, Russia estimated over 100,000 Krokodil users. Entire hospital wards filled with patients whose flesh was literally falling off. The drug offered a cheap heroin substitute. The cost was your body decomposing while you were still alive. Bromo-DragonFLY. Most psychedelics last 6 to 12 hours. Bromo-DragonFLY lasts up to 3 days. That's not a typo. A single dose can produce continuous hallucinations for 72 hours. The drug is a phenethylamine derivative named after the shape of its molecular structure, which resembles a dragonfly. It's extraordinarily potent. Active doses are measured in micrograms, thousandths of a milligram. The margin between a trip dose and a lethal dose is dangerously narrow. The most disturbing effect is severe vasoconstriction. The drug tightens blood vessels so aggressively that extremities lose circulation. Documented cases include users losing fingers, toes, and portions of limbs to gangrene after a single use. Your trip might be interesting. Your fingers might not survive it. Overdoses cause seizures, organ failure, and death. Because the effects last so long, hospitals struggle to manage patients who are actively deteriorating over days, not hours. There's no antidote. Bromo-DragonFLY briefly appeared in the European drug market in the mid-2000s, often sold as LSD to unsuspecting buyers. Several deaths resulted from this misrepresentation. Flakka, alpha PVP. Flakka hit Florida around 2014 and immediately generated the most unhinged news headlines in drug history. People running naked through traffic. A man trying to break into a police station claiming cars were chasing him. A woman who ran into traffic screaming, "I am God." Alpha PVP is a synthetic cathinone related to bath salts. It floods the brain with dopamine and norepinephrine, producing a state medical professionals call excited delirium. Body temperature skyrockets to 105+ degrees. The user experiences paranoia, hallucinations, and perceived superhuman strength.
That last part creates real problems. People in excited delirium genuinely don't feel pain. They fight through tasers, they break handcuffs. It's not actual superhuman strength, but rather the complete removal of the body's damage-limiting signals. Your muscles can always exert more force than normal. Your brain just prevents it to protect tendons and bones. Flakka removes those limits. The drug costs roughly $5 a dose, earning it the nickname $5 insanity. Users often strip naked because their body temperature becomes unbearable. The combination of extreme heat, psychosis, and apparent pain immunity makes every encounter potentially lethal. Datura, Jimson weed. Every drug community on the internet has the same advice about Datura. Don't. Not be careful. Not start with a low dose. Just don't. Datura contains tropane alkaloids, primarily scopolamine and atropine. Unlike recreational hallucinogens, where users know they're hallucinating, Datura produces true delirium. Users cannot distinguish hallucinations from reality. They hold conversations with people who aren't there. They smoke cigarettes that don't exist. They walk into traffic following friends who are miles away. The effects begin 30 to 60 minutes after ingestion and last 2 to 3 days. Pupils dilate so completely that vision blurs for up to a week afterward. Heart rate becomes dangerously irregular. Dry mouth becomes so severe that swallowing becomes painful. Trip reports read like horror stories. Users describe shadow people, swarms of insects, and mundane hallucinations so convincing they don't realize anything is wrong. One common experience: having a normal conversation with someone, then watching them dissolve into nothing, over and over for 3 days. The plant grows wild across North America. Every few years, teenagers discover it. Hospitalizations follow. There are no recreational Datura users, only people who tried it once. Etorphine, M99. Etorphine was developed in 1963 for one specific purpose: tranquilizing large animals. Elephants, rhinos, hippos. Animals where normal sedatives would require gallons to work. M99 does the job in milliliters. It's approximately 3,000 times more potent than morphine. 1/100th of a milligram can sedate a grown man. The drug is so dangerous that veterinarians working with it carry the antidote, diprenorphine, preloaded in syringes on their person at all times. Skin contact can be lethal, not injection, contact. If you splash Etorphine on your hand, you can absorb a fatal dose through your skin in minutes. Labs that handle it require full protective equipment and buddy systems. Nobody works with M99 alone. In 2002, Russian special forces used a related compound, Carfentanil mixed with an anesthetic, to end the Moscow theater hostage crisis. They pumped the gas through ventilation. It killed 130 hostages along with the terrorists. The dosage problem with ultra-potent opioids is that the gap between unconsciousness and death barely exists. Etorphine has zero recreational use potential. There is no recreational dose. There's unconscious and there's dead. DiPT, diisopropyl tryptamine. Every psychedelic drug distorts vision. LSD produces visual trails. Mushrooms create breathing patterns on surfaces. DMT generates geometric fractals. DiPT does something no other drug does. It only affects sound. Your vision stays normal. Your thinking stays relatively clear, but every sound becomes distorted. Human voices drop several octaves, becoming deep and demonic. Music becomes unrecognizable, warped into something alien and wrong. Familiar songs sound like they're being played in a nightmare. The pitch shift follows a consistent pattern. Higher frequencies drop more than lower ones. Women's voices become deep male voices. Children sound monstrous. Your own voice sounds like someone else entirely. Phone conversations become surreal because the distortion applies to everything you hear. The effects last 8 to 12 hours. Some users report residual hearing distortion for days or weeks afterward. In rare cases, persistent tinnitus develops. You're gambling with your auditory system. DiPT is classified as a tryptamine, related to DMT and psilocybin. But while those drugs are primarily visual, DiPT somehow selectively targets auditory processing. The mechanism isn't fully understood. It shouldn't be possible for a drug to so specifically affect one sense. DNP, dinitrophenol. DNP was originally an industrial chemical. Munitions workers in World War I noticed they lost weight rapidly when exposed to it. By the 1930s, it was marketed as a diet pill. Then people started dying. The drug works by uncoupling oxidative phosphorylation in mitochondria. In normal cells, energy from food creates ATP, the body's fuel. DNP disrupts this process, converting that energy directly into heat instead. Your metabolism skyrockets, fat melts off, you literally cook from the inside. The problem is that there's no off switch. Once DNP is in your system, you can't stop the heating process. Body temperature climbs to 104, 106, 108 degrees. Organs begin failing. Sweat pours off you. Ice baths can't cool you fast enough. Death from DNP overdose is described as one of the worst ways to die in toxicology. The lethal dose varies wildly between individuals. What causes mild weight loss in one person causes organ failure in another. There's no way to predict your response. Despite being banned for human consumption decades ago, DNP still circulates in bodybuilding communities. Every year, young people die from it. The drug works for fat loss. It also works for killing you. Jenkem. This one's real, though it became famous partly as an internet hoax that turned out to have actual roots. Jenkem is fermented human sewage, collected in bottles and left to decompose. Users inhale the gases produced. The practice was first documented in Zambia in the 1990s among street children. They collected feces and urine in plastic bottles, covered them with a balloon or plastic wrap, and let the mixture ferment in the sun. The methane and hydrogen sulfide gases produced were then inhaled for a brief, delirious high. The effects reportedly include visual and auditory hallucinations lasting about an hour. The biological mechanism isn't well studied, which is understandable. Not many researchers are lining up to investigate fermented sewage inhalation. In 2007, a hoaxed police bulletin about Jenkem use in American schools went viral. News stations ran panicked segments. Most of the American angle was fabricated, but the original Zambian practice was documented by legitimate aid organizations. The real story isn't funny. It's a reflection of poverty so extreme that children resort to inhaling waste for temporary escape. The internet turned it into a joke. The reality behind it is bleak. Carfentanil. Carfentanil makes fentanyl look weak. It's 100 times more potent than fentanyl and approximately 10,000 times stronger than morphine. It was designed exclusively for tranquilizing large animals, primarily elephants. A lethal human dose is approximately 20 micrograms. For perspective, a grain of salt weighs about 60 micrograms. 3 grains of carfentanil could kill you. You cannot see a lethal dose with the naked eye. This potency created a law enforcement nightmare. When carfentanil began appearing in street drug supplies around 2016, overdose deaths spiked dramatically. Users buying what they thought was heroin were receiving something thousands of times stronger. First responders needed multiple doses of naloxone to reverse carfentanil overdoses, where a single dose works for heroin. Officers and forensic teams had to adopt hazmat protocols when handling suspected carfentanil. Touching or inhaling trace amounts during evidence processing could be fatal. China was the primary source of illicit carfentanil until banning its export in 2018, but the chemical knowledge exists. Production continues. A kilogram of carfentanil could theoretically produce 50 million lethal doses. That's the terrifying math of ultra-potent synthetic opioids. Adrenochrome. Adrenochrome is a real chemical compound. It's the oxidation product of adrenaline, formed when epinephrine breaks down. You can buy it from chemical suppliers. It exists in the human body naturally in trace amounts. That's where the facts end and the mythology begins. Hunter S. Thompson mentioned adrenochrome in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, describing it as a powerful psychedelic harvested from living human adrenal glands. Thompson was writing fiction, but conspiracy communities took it as documentary. The compound has been studied since the 1950s. Some researchers, notably Abram Hoffer, proposed it might play a role in schizophrenia. Small studies suggested mild psychological effects at high doses. Nothing confirmed a powerful psychedelic experience. The research was inconclusive and largely abandoned. The conspiracy theory claims that elites harvest adrenochrome from terrorized children because fear-produced adrenaline creates more potent adrenochrome. This has zero scientific basis. Adrenochrome can be synthesized cheaply in any chemistry lab. There would be no reason to harvest it from humans even if it did something remarkable. The real substance is pharmacologically unremarkable. The mythological version says more about internet conspiracy culture than about chemistry. Nutmeg, high dose. This one's sitting in your kitchen right now. Nutmeg, the common baking spice, is a deliriant at high doses. 2 to 3 whole nutmegs, roughly 15 to 25 grams, produce effects that range from miserable to genuinely dangerous. Nutmeg contains myristicin, which the body may convert into compounds resembling MMDA, an amphetamine-like psychedelic. The onset takes 4 to 6 hours, which leads many first-timers to take more, thinking the initial dose failed. The effects then last 24 to 48 hours. That's up to 2 days of delirium from a kitchen spice. The experience is almost universally described as terrible. Intense nausea, severe dry mouth, racing heart, paranoia, hallucinations that aren't fun, they're disorienting and frightening. The hangover lasts days. Online trip reports consistently describe it as one of the worst drug experiences possible. Toxicity is real. Nutmeg poisoning sends people to emergency rooms every year. Organ damage occurs at high doses. A handful of deaths have been attributed to nutmeg overdose throughout medical history. Every generation of teenagers discovers you can get high on nutmeg. Every generation also discovers why nobody does it twice.